My wife cheated on me with our attorney, convincing me to sign over $300, $0 in joint assets, only to find out she's been secretly planning to sell our house and split everything with her lover, all while I'm stuck fighting her in court. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy caught in something like this. Honestly, I thought I knew my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, and yeah, we had our ups and downs, but I always believed we were solid. Then one day, out of nowhere, everything fell apart. It started with small things, her being unusually secretive about her phone, taking calls in the bathroom, deleting texts, acting like I was some sort of paranoid psycho for even asking about her whereabouts. At the time, I just brushed it off. I figured she was stressed or maybe just tired of me. But I should known better because what came next hit me like a freight train. It all started with a simple, almost innocent mistake. I was working late at the office one Thursday night and decided to check our bank account just to make sure everything was in order. I'd been suspicious for a while. She'd been acting weird around money, asking about savings, making excuses not to discuss joint expenses, and suddenly she was very interested in the house's value. I figured it was nothing, but I wanted to be sure. When I logged in, I saw a transaction I didn't recognize. It was a large transfer, nearly $50, $0, made to an account I'd never seen before. My stomach sank. I immediately called Lisa, but she didn't pick up. When she finally did, she said she was at the gym, just unwinding, but her voice sounded off, more defensive than usual. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that transaction and what it might mean. Was she hiding something? Was she planning to leave? The next morning, I decided I needed to check her phone. I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had no choice. I unlocked her phone while she was in the shower and what I found made my blood run cold. Texts. Lots of texts. Flirty messages with someone named Jake, the attorney we'd been using for some legal stuff. I read her talking about how much she hated the way I was so clueless, and how she'd finally found someone who understands her needs. She was planning to leave, I realized, and she'd been doing it behind my back the entire time. That moment was like a punch to the gut. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this? How could she lie about everything, about the money, about us, about her feelings? I confronted her that same night. She everything at first, calling me paranoid, saying I was reading too much into her texts. But I had proof. I showed her the bank transfer, the messages. Her face twisted into a bitchy smirk, and she told me I was overreacting, that I was just insecure and jealous. She said she was just talking to a friend, that Jake was harmless, and that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. But I knew better. I could see the lies in her eyes. The whole thing tore me apart. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, then kicked while I was down. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. For months, I'd been working hard at my job, trying to build a future for us, and she was out there sneaking around, planning her escape. I felt crushed, but that wasn't even the worst part. It was the realization that she'd convinced me to sign over a huge chunk of our assets, more than $300, $0, thinking we were about to buy a new house or invest in something. All the while, she was secretly planning to sell our house, split everything with Jake, and leave me with nothing. The betrayal was staggering. What made it worse was her attitude afterward. Instead of showing remorse or trying to fix things, she became even more bitchy, more dismissive. She'd throw tantrums about how I was controlling, how I didn't trust her, and how I was jealous of her happiness. She kept insisting she loved me, but her actions told a different story. I was stuck, feeling like I was losing everything: my wife, my money, my sense of stability. I knew I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. I had to do something. But what? That's where I was, lost in a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and confusion, trying to figure out what my next move should be. After I uncovered her messages and saw the trail of lies she'd been weaving, I knew I had to act fast. There was no way I was going to let her walk away with everything: my money, our house, my life savings. but I also knew I had to be smart about it. Lisa was clever, manipulative, and she had a way of twisting everything to make herself look innocent. Still, I couldn't just confront her blindly. I needed proof, a plan, and maybe even some legal advice. The first thing I did was dig into our financials more thoroughly. I pulled up all the recent bank statements, credit card bills, and anything that could give me a clearer picture of her plans. Turns out, she'd been funneling money into that account with Jake for months. She convinced me to sign a power of attorney, claiming it was for convenience, so she could handle some of the household finances while I was busy at work. But what I didn't realize was that she had been using it to transfer large sums of money, and she'd been making plans to liquidate assets without my knowledge. She kept telling me she was just tired, that I was overreacting, and that I was being paranoid. It was her typical pattern: deny, lie, deflect. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I started documenting everything: screenshots of her texts, copies of the bank transfers, even sneaking around her emails when she wasn't looking. I was careful. I didn't want her to suspect I was onto her. I knew she'd escalate her lies if she thought I was catching on. One night, I caught her in a lie that was the last straw. She told me she was going out with her girlfriends, but I saw her car in front of a house I didn't recognize. I decided to follow her. She was meeting Jake at a small, upscale apartment downtown. I parked a few blocks away, watching her go inside. That's when I saw them, her and Jake, kissing passionately on the balcony. The sight of it made my stomach turn. I felt this mix of rage, heartbreak, and utter disbelief. I'd suspected she was cheating, but seeing it with my own eyes was another level altogether. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I waited until the next morning, then laid everything out. I told her I knew about her affair, about the money she'd been stealing, and about her plans to sell the house. Her reaction was a mixture of anger, denial, and biting sarcasm. She called me crazy, said I was stalking her, and accused me of being insecure. She even had the nerve to say I was jealous of Jake, like that was the real issue. But I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. All those years, all that trust, gone in an instant. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and hollow. I'd always believed in honesty and partnership, and now I was staring at a future that looked like it was crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept thinking about everything I'd lost: our home, my savings, my sense of stability. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to my face all along, convincing me to sign over our assets, all while planning to leave me. With nothing, that realization cut deep. I felt like I'd been played for a fool. I knew I couldn't just walk away without fighting. I started researching lawyers and how to protect my rights. I also knew I had to gather every piece of evidence I could: texts, bank statements, emails, anything that proved her intentions. I was determined to fight for what was mine. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we'd built without a fight. The question was, how much damage had she already done and how much more was she planning to do? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going down without a fight. Once I had the evidence, her texts, the bank transfers, the secret plans, I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't let her keep manipulating the situation or sell the house behind my back. The first step was finding a good lawyer. I contacted a family law attorney who specialized in divorce and asset protection. After explaining everything, he confirmed what I already suspected. I needed to get a court order to freeze the assets and stop any sale of the house until the case was sorted out. In the meantime, Lisa's attitude shifted from defiant to outright hostile. She started throwing tantrums, accusing me of ruining her life, calling me controlling, and saying I was making her out to be a criminal. I could see her trying to spin her lies, painting herself as the victim, while secretly planning her next move. Her bitchy side came out even more, especially when I confronted her about the house sale plans. She everything, but her tone was sharp, dismissive, and full of contempt. I decided to confront her again, this time more directly. I sat her down and laid it all out: proof of her affair, her secret plans, the money she'd been stealing, and my intention to fight for what was ours. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She shot back with a barrage of lies, saying I was paranoid, that I'd misunderstood everything, and that I was just jealous because she was so much better than me. She even had the audacity to accuse me of trying to control her, as if I was the bad guy. I could see she was trying to manipulate me into backing down, but I wasn't having it. I told her I'd already spoken to a lawyer and that I was prepared to go to court to stop her. That's when she really lost it. She started screaming, calling me names, saying I was a worthless husband, a loser, and that I'd never keep her from doing what she wanted. It was honestly shocking how bitter and spiteful she'd become, like she didn't even care about the damage she was doing anymore. I felt a huge rush of anger and sadness. I'd always thought we had something real, but now I saw her for what she really was: a liar, a manipulator, and someone willing to destroy everything we had for her own selfish gain. Despite her bitchy attitude, I stayed calm. I knew I had to keep my head clear if I wanted to win this. I told her I was filing for an emergency court order to freeze the assets and prevent her from selling the house. I also made sure to get copies of all her communications, texts, emails, everything I could use in court. While I was doing all this, I couldn't help feeling a deep sense of betrayal. She convinced me to sign over a huge chunk of our money, promising she'd use it for us for a future together. Instead, she'd been secretly planning to split everything with Jake and walk away. The emotional toll was immense. I felt like I'd been punched again, this time not just by her lies but by the realization that I'd been so blind. I kept replaying all the moments where she'd lied, all the times she'd dismissed my concerns, and all the money I'd worked so hard for that was now at risk. Every day, I wondered how I'd get past this. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? How do you even look at her without feeling disgusted? The worst part was knowing she'd been so bitchy, so dismissive, like she didn't even care about the damage she caused. It was as if I was just some obstacle in her game. I had to remind myself that I wasn't going to be the victim here. I was going to fight for my rights and for what was rightfully mine. I contacted the bank, alerted them about the freeze order, and started preparing for the court hearing. I knew she'd try to fight me, probably with more lies and manipulations, but I couldn't let her win. The stakes were too high. My mind kept spinning. What if she manages to sell the house before I get the court order? How much more damage will she do? I had to stay one step ahead. This was turning into a war, and I was determined to come out on top, even if I felt like I was drowning in heartbreak, anger, and betrayal. The court hearing was set surprisingly quickly, which told me how serious the situation was. I had all my evidence organized: screenshots, bank statements, her threatening messages, and I was ready to lay it all out. I knew she'd try to spin her lies again, so I had to be precise and calm. When I walked into that courtroom, I saw Lisa sitting there with her bitchy smirk, acting like she was the innocent victim. I could see right through it. She was playing her role, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. My lawyer did most of the talking, but I made sure to testify too. I explained how she'd manipulated me into signing over the assets, how she'd been secretly planning the sale of our house, and how her affair with Jake was just the tip of the iceberg. I could see her trying to interrupt, throwing in snarky comments, but the judge was firm. She asked Lisa directly about the texts, the money transfers, and her plans to leave me. Lisa's face got red, and she started stumbling over her words. She everything but her tone was defensive and bitchy, like she was furious I was exposing her. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, which prevented Lisa from selling or transferring any assets until the full hearing. I felt relief, but also a heavy weight of anxiety. I'd done what I could, but I knew this wasn't over. Lisa's lawyer was already planning her counterattack, and I had a sinking feeling she'd try to manipulate the situation further. Still, I was determined to hold my ground. I realized that the fight wasn't just about money or the house anymore. It was about standing up to her, about protecting what little dignity I had left. In the days that followed, Lisa's attitude only got worse. She was openly bitchy, sneering at me, calling me paranoid, jealous, and a control freak. She insisted I was just trying to ruin her because I was insecure, but I knew better. I saw her for what she really was, someone selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. I started to feel a strange mix of anger and relief. Anger because I'd been played for a fool, and relief because I finally had some control back. The legal battle was just beginning, but I knew I had to stay strong. Money had become the real. She convinced me to sign over a huge chunk of our savings, promising it was for our future. Instead, she'd been secretly funneling it to Jake, planning to split everything. I was furious. How could she be so bitchy and dishonest at the same time? I had to face the fact that my trust was shattered. I was also angry at myself for being so naive, for not seeing the signs earlier. But now I was more focused than ever, getting all the proof I could, making sure she couldn't walk away with our house or my money, and protecting myself from her manipulations. I also started thinking about what comes next. I couldn't stay married to someone who lied and cheated so blatantly. I knew I had to prepare for a divorce, but I was also worried about her trying to screw me over financially. I'd hear stories about women like her, bitchy, vindictive, and willing to do whatever it takes to get their way. I wasn't going to let her win that easily. I was already planning my next moves, talking to other lawyers, figuring out how to prove her plans to sell the house, and how to get her out of my life for good. It was a mess, but I was starting to see a way forward, even if it was painful as hell. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between anger, despair, and a desperate need to reclaim my life. Lisa's bitchy attitude never let up. She was constantly throwing barbs, calling me pathetic, crazy, or jealous, trying to paint herself as the victim. But I didn't care anymore. I had my lawyer, my evidence, and a burning desire to get out of this nightmare with some sense of justice. The court proceedings dragged on, but I was prepared. I had everything documented, her secret plans, the money transfers, her flirtatious texts with Jake, and I made sure to keep detailed notes of every interaction. Meanwhile, Lisa kept trying to manipulate the situation, claiming I was stalking her, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. Her lies were so transparent it was almost laughable, but I knew I had to stay calm, keep my head clear, and focus on the facts. One of the biggest surprises came when I found out she'd been secretly talking to a lawyer of her own. She was trying to find a way to get the house sold before the court could block it. I caught wind of this through some emails she accidentally left open on her laptop. I printed everything and handed it over to my lawyer. That was the moment I realized she was willing to do anything, lie, cheat, manipulate, to get her way. Her bitchy side was on full display, sneering at me during our meetings, trying to turn everyone against me. But I refused to back down. The day of the full hearing finally arrived. I was nervous but determined. I knew I had the evidence to prove her plans and her affair. And I was ready to fight for my rights. When the judge asked her directly about the sale of the house, her face went pale for the first time. She stammered, tried to deny, then snapped at me with that bitchy glare, accusing me of trying to control her life. I felt a surge of rage. How dare she call me controlling when she'd been sneaking around, lying and planning to screw me over? The judge listened carefully, then issued an order that froze all assets and prevented any sale of the house until the case was resolved. I felt a small victory, but I knew Lisa wasn't done. Her lawyer immediately started working on a counterclaim, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Her bitchy attitude was relentless, but I refused to be intimidated. I'd already come too far to back down now. As I sat there, I couldn't help but think about everything I'd lost: trust, stability, the future I'd envisioned, and how she'd betrayed me. She'd been so manipulative, so bitchy, twisting everything to her advantage. But I also realized something important. I was stronger than I thought. I'd faced her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal, and I was still standing. The fight wasn't over, but I had gained a foothold. I knew I'd get through this, even if it took everything I had. Now I was preparing for the next stage: divorce negotiations, protecting what was mine, and finally, moving on from the woman who'd so thoroughly betrayed me. The emotional scars would take time to heal, but I knew I'd come out the other side better for it. The experience had opened my eyes to how bitchy and manipulative some people can be when they're caught in their own lies. And I was determined never to let that happen again. Looking back, I realized that this entire nightmare taught me some hard lessons about trust, manipulation, and the true nature of the people we think we know. Lisa's bitchy, selfish attitude, her lies, her affair with Jake, none of it surprised me as much as the realization that I'd been so blind for so long. I kept asking myself, how did I let it get this far? How did I not see the signs? But honestly, I was too caught up in trying to believe the best of her, to see the truth behind her bitchy facade. Getting through all of this has been one of the most emotionally draining experiences of my life. I've gone from feeling crushed, betrayed, and angry to finally feeling a sense of clarity. I've learned that some people will do anything to get what they want, money, status, or just to feed their own selfish needs. Lisa was one of those people. She thought she could manipulate her way out of everything, spin her lies, and come out on top. But I refused to let her win. The court process was brutal. Watching her bitchy attitude try to turn everyone against me, her constant lies and manipulations, it was exhausting. But I kept my focus, stayed truthful, and fought with everything I had. The legal system, while imperfect, gave me a fighting chance to hold onto what was mine. I managed to freeze the assets, stop the house from being sold, and hold her accountable. It wasn't easy, and I won't lie. There were moments I wanted to give up, throw in the towel, and just walk away. But I didn't. I stood my ground. Now, I'm in the process of finalizing the divorce. It's a relief to finally be free of her bitchy attitude, her lies, and her manipulations. I've started rebuilding my life, focused on my career, my friends, and making sure I don't get caught in another toxic relationship. I want to warn others, don't ignore the signs. If someone is acting bitchy, secretive, or constantly lying, pay attention. Because if you don't, you might end up losing everything: your money, your trust, your future. Most importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived the betrayal, the legal battles, and the emotional chaos, and I will continue to move forward. I don't hate Lisa, at least not anymore. I just feel sorry for her. Sorry she's so bitchy and selfish that she thought she could destroy everything we had and still come out on top. That's her problem, not mine. Today, I'm finally free. I've taken back control of my life and my money. I've learned to trust myself again, to be cautious, and to never let someone manipulate me like that again. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: trust is earned, not given blindly. Watch out for the bitchy, manipulative types, because they're often the ones who will ruin everything if you let them, and when they do, fight back. Because in the end, the truth always comes out, and justice, however delayed, will catch up with them.